Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, beautiful people. Wherever you're watching us from this world, welcome to another episode of Unsilence Grief. Today, I'm so excited about having Dr. Momoko Uno live with me. And I came across your story on a podcast platform, and I was really drawn to it for so many reasons. First of all, for who you are, how you went through your own grief, but also because it is a topic that has affected millions and millions of people around the world. I am not going to take away from your story. Without further ado, would you do us the honor to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Thanks so much for the kind introduction. So my name is Momoko, and I'm actually from Perth, Australia. And I live in New York City now, and I'm a doctor of integrative medicine. And my mother passed away a few years ago. And I was living in New York City, and during the height of the pandemic, she was diagnosed with cancer. And Australia, as you know, was going through a lockdown. And even though I'm an Australian citizen, I was mandated to go through the 2-week long quarantine period, which was solitary confinement in a hotel room with a guard outside my door and the windows bolted shut. I'm sure most Australians have heard the story before, and they know somebody who's gone through that experience. So I went through the quarantine experience, and my mother sadly passed away while I was in quarantine, and which was complicated by my own I had a very severe medical condition that flared up that had been in remission, and I almost died myself too. So I was going through an extremely challenging medical situation and trying to process grief at the same time.
I can't even imagine what you have gone through in those 2 weeks, because you were completely alone, completely cut off from the world. I know we've got internet and we can, connect with people through that. But knowing that your mom is about to transition and not being able to leave this hotel room, this is so beyond me. I can't even begin to imagine, because so many people have gone through this experience, yet yours was even elevated through what you just mentioned. Can you, and I also know, and I'd love to hear about this, that you actually did get a quick exemption, that you did have a short moment where you were able to leave and see her. Can you talk us a little bit through these 2 weeks, because this is such a big story. What happened there?
So I think that I was very, very lucky to get the exemption, because I was on this Facebook group. I think it was called Australians Stranded Overseas. There was like tens of thousands of people on there. And I'd asked about trying to get an exemption, and not one person said that they were granted an exemption to leave hotel quarantine. And so I got to Australia thinking, oh no, I'm never going to get through. But I was, one of my friends told me after I arrived, you have to try, because one of her friends actually had gotten an exemption. So I just started to email random people. And then I did finally, I think I wasted a lot of time, but I was finally able to get through to somebody. And I think it was about halfway through that I was finally able to be given this exemption, which was 30 minutes long. And I was very fortunate to be able to see her. The doctor, the palliative care doctor, actually gave her blood to try to keep her alive so that I could just even see her. So it was very kind of the hospital to do that for me. And then when I was actually given the exemption, they actually told me very, very few people were actually permitted to leave quarantine. So I was, extremely fortunate that I actually had that in such a short period of time, 30 minutes. And so I agonized about in the leading up to it, when I knew that I was actually going to get through and actually get to see her. What do you say to somebody when you know it's the last 30 minutes? And I had a whole list of things that I was going to say. And of course, I didn't say any of those things. It just,
do you mind me asking?
Yes.
Yeah, how, like, I can't even imagine this. That's why I'm asking so naively, maybe. But how was it getting from the hotel to the hospital? Were you, like, was there particular rules around this? Were you guided? How did that even work?
I kind of joked about this, but I felt like some kind of celebrity, because I had this, or carrying a bomb or something, because there were so many people. I was escorted in a black SUV and with a tremendous amount of people just making sure that I wasn't going to make a run for it.
Wow.
And yeah, so I basically had a bodyguard and a driver take me, and then a nurse met me who I'd been speaking with before I actually went to see my mother, but I was constantly being watched. And before I went there, I was told by the I think the Department of Health that once I got to the hospital, if I came within I forgot if it was within a few feet of somebody, I had to tell them that I might have COVID, which was the most, can you imagine, the most ridiculous thing, right? To be screaming through the hotel corridors that I might have COVID. I'm from America and I might have COVID. And anyway, and then I told the nurse, I said, I want to make sure that I do everything right. Do you want me to do this? And he said, don't say a thing. So I just quietly was escorted into my mother's room, and
did you get time alone with her in there, or did you still have a good?
No, fortunately I didn't have anybody, and I did get that 30 minutes with my mother, but he told me as I was entering, he said, I just want to let you know it is literally 30 minutes to the second, and I will come and knock on the door, not 1 minute more.
Wow. I can only imagine that this would have been such a sacred moment for you to have those 30 minutes. I'm just going to put it out there. You can share as much or as little or nothing about these 30 minutes. I'll leave this up to you.
Oh, absolutely. So, I had, because my father had passed maybe about 15 years prior to my mother passing, and my goodbye with my father was quite this magical experience, and I felt like I got to sit with him for a long time, because he was actually quite well. The last time I saw him was quite conversational, so I had hyped it up in my mind that I was going to have this amazing goodbye with my mother. And the unfortunate thing is I did not have this amazing goodbye. I was really hoping to have some kind of exchange with her and to be able to say something, but she was on so much medication. She actually didn't recognize me until the very, very end. And I was with her, and I was massaging her and caressing her shoulder, and she just pushed me away. So the whole thing was actually quite tragic. And I did get to say at the very, very end, I think so the nurse came and knocked on the door and said, because I was trying to talk to my mum the whole time, and he said to me, look, it's time to go. And I was devastated because she didn't even know it was me. And then I went and got my bags, and then this little voice said, go back to her now. And I went back to her and I said, don't worry, Mum. My sisters and I are going to take care of everything. And she said, oh, it's you. And then I felt her spirit come back for like a second. Yeah. And I was able to connect with her, and I said, promise that we'll see each other again. And she said yes. I said, I'll come see you again. And that was that.
I have goosebumps.
So so I got that connection for 1 minute, the one that I was, but I got something, it was that part was miraculous, that I got to see her spirit come back for,
and that's probably exactly what you were hoping for. Just at least that one moment of connection. I can't even begin to imagine. It was such an extreme time that we were all in, and there was so many people waiting and hoping for this one moment, and it is so easy under huge quotation marks to sit there and think, you know what, we're still connected, we had our whole lives together, and trying to put this into a picture that works for your heart, to not completely be shattered. But then to be actually in the situation and experience that and be completely confined in a hotel room, and then you get this one chance and there's no connection. I cannot even imagine how devastating that would have been, and then how beautiful and magical to actually have her spirit come in at the very last moment. I think that's really beautiful. So you were brought back to the hotel after that, after your final goodbye with your mom. And what happened then? Because I know this is extreme, doesn't even cut it. So I'll let you tell the story.
So after that, I slipped into a very dark place, because I knew that there was before then, there was some excitement, like, oh, I'll probably be up to see my mom, and I was like fighting for something, and there's something very positive about, even though knowing that she was going to pass, right, that I might be able to see her again, but that was over. And it was just, and then all I was doing was waiting for her to die. And so that was just horrific. And then I had that whole, my medical thing came, and it was interesting how that all happened, because then I was completely sidetracked, because I was like, almost dying myself. So my grief I couldn't even process it, because just struggling to stay alive and just try to figure out my health and get myself back on track required so much energy that I actually didn't really, I couldn't even cry, because I had so much
you were in
physical
absolute
symptoms.
survival mode.
Yes, I
Do you mind
was.
sharing that, because our audience doesn't know what you're talking about here
Yes,
when you
yes.
said
Oh,
you almost
absolutely.
died? Yeah.
So I have this immune system disorder that's called mast cell activation syndrome, which actually has become quite well known now because of COVID, because a lot of people who have long COVID actually have mast cell issues. But before that, it was actually it's like kind of like a quite a rare disorder that I ended up having. And anyway, so the way that my symptoms manifested was, it was usually if I was exposed to something that was allergic, I would have an anaphylactic reaction. So that would be like, sinuses and throat and everything closing over, difficulty breathing, and then collapse, seizure, unconscious. So I was teetering on the cusp of having a seizure mostly, and then I could feel all my like sinuses and everything kind of closing up. And I just felt myself like going into an alternate kind of level of consciousness. And so, and then the shakes started happening. And sure, I'm sure that the stress of it was actually probably triggering it too. But what ended up happening was I was exposed to some mold. So I was buying groceries, because I didn't really want to eat the hotel food because it was so gross, it's nasty. And so, but I was delivered a bag of moldy green beans. I know, isn't that crazy? Just like the weird sequence of bad things that happened, and it contaminated my entire fridge. And and then I had an anaphylactic reaction to that. So anyway, so that's kind of what I hadn't really had a mast cell flare up in quite some time. So I didn't have any medication, nothing. I didn't have antihistamines. I didn't have an inhaler.
It's
I
probably the
had
last
nothing with
thing
me.
you would have thought of,
No.
traveling overseas to
Yeah.
see your mom, and
Yeah.
then that happened. So how did you actually get through that? Because you told me in our pre-chat that you actually ended up not eating at all because you were
Yes.
scared too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I did try to eat a little bit, but each time I ate a little bit, I'd have some of the symptoms again, because my system was just so
Yeah.
extremely sensitive. So I starved
Yeah.
myself. So, it was like kind of this ridiculous situation of trying to eat something to give myself some kind of nutrients, and then
Yeah.
potentially having an anaphylactic reaction and a seizure.
Mm.
Or just seeing if I could starve myself to minimize the symptoms. And I
Yeah.
realized that starvation was the best option, because I couldn't eat anything. So
Incredible.
I didn't eat at all for a few days, and then probably very like when I say little, I'm meaning like a teaspoon of rice for like weeks. Not
Yeah.
weeks, sorry, the entire week
Those.
that I
Yeah.
was there, just some some tea or something. And that's how I
Yeah.
got through it. And then my system eventually calmed down, and I was slowly able to eat. But I think I
Yeah.
probably in that period lost like, 10 pounds or something. I was already underweight when I went in, because I was so stressed out. And so I
Yeah.
lost even more. So I was very, very underweight.
Yeah. How did you get out of all of that? Do you mind sharing the timeline of when you left the hotel and your mom's passing and coming back to New York?
Yeah, so fortunately, because I'm in this field of working it, with
Yeah.
sick people like myself, so I had an advantage that I knew what I needed to do. So I do think that just having some information about how to heal these types of disorders is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
So by the time that I came back to, so I was in Australia for about a month after my mum passed to, help out with cleaning up her apartment and
Oh,
everything.
wow.
And by
Yeah.
the time that I left, I was eating probably I think maybe about half the amount that I was before.
Mm.
So I was already like, getting a little bit better. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much it took, probably an entire year maybe to like gain my weight back and my
Yeah.
strength, and also going through all that grief took because I had to
Mm.
put off grieving because I didn't have, it's very exhausting to process grief, as you know,
Yeah.
right? I didn't have the
Yeah.
energy. I was exhausted. I just
Yeah.
slept. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so grateful actually that you touch on that part, because there is something that I often do in terms of when people talk about grief, and there is this common expectation that you have to go through grief, you have to work through the emotions, you can't ignore grief. And here's my belief. I would love to share that with you, and I would love to hear your opinion on that, because you have actually been through what I'm about to explain here. I often say to people, I like comparing physical pain with the emotional pain here, because when we come, and I use an extreme example, when we come to a field of wounded soldiers and we see those people laying there, what is the first thing we do? We go in, we try to dress the wounds, we try to get them to a nurse, to a doctor, or to get somebody to look after them. We try to minimize the pain as much as we can to help them get better.
Yes.
And everybody finds that an absolute normal reaction. Everybody in their right mind would do exactly that. Then,
Yes.
compared to the emotional side of things, people are grieving, they experience this excruciating pain of loss, of losing a person they are so close to. And then everybody is sitting there going like, you have to go through this, you have to feel this emotion, you have to work through that. And I'm always like, says who? And why are the rules around physical and emotional pain complete polar opposite? I don't understand that. I think what you just experienced, or what you described that you experienced in that month, is something where your body, maybe your subconscious, was going through this. I need space, I need time to be able to deal with that. And I think whatever we do in that time, for me, in my situation, it was chasing happiness. I wanted to create a happy life for the boys. I wanted to continue the love and the happiness that Rob and I created in our little family. I wanted that to continue for the boys. That didn't mean that there was no space to grieve. It just means that it made it a lot lighter for us, because it's not light anyway. I'm saying lighter. I'm saying this very, very
Yes.
carefully. So I would love to know how how do you feel that to be true? How does that ring true for you or not? In terms of, it is okay if we uh, allow ourselves the time, or maybe even try to lessen that intense pain. I'm not a big fan of, you have to go through this emotion, you have to suffer, you have to experience it. It's not that I'm running away. I'm just trying to make that easier for my boys. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you have kids.
Yeah.
I think that kids naturally will try to they have very different coping mechanisms, and I think that
Mm.
children know how to distract themselves quite well, and adults um they feel differently about distracting themselves and avoiding uncomfortable feelings, right? I think
Mm.
that there are people who just go straight into denial about it and
Yeah.
repress all their feelings, and other people who feel very like you need to go really headstrong. For
Yeah.
me, I just thought to myself, I can only really share my own personal story, but I just
Yeah.
thought to myself, I'm just going to deal with whatever's present in the moment. And
Exactly.
and
I
and
was
so
the same.
I just kind of went with my own personal flow, and I
Mm.
didn't really grieve like the sadness part of the grieving part
Mm.
didn't come until probably after the shock and the
Mm.
exhaustion had passed. Like I didn't,
Yeah.
there was times when I would sleep most of the day. I'd have like 2 or 3 naps per day. And when you're
Mm.
that tired, I just don't think that the energy is there to even be able to
Yeah.
focus on
Yeah.
even the negative feel. You might be able to, I could have kind of sensed that there was a well of grief inside of me, but
Mm.
I couldn't even tap into it because I was just so tired.
Yeah.
And so I allowed myself to be tired and I allowed myself to
Mm.
rest. And that went on for
Mm.
months
Yeah.
until I popped out of that and I was
Mm.
able to have the energy to process what had
Yeah.
happened. And there were
Yeah.
plenty of times when I just couldn't quite go there. And I did this actually during the quarantine because I knew if I started crying, the
Yeah.
anaphylaxis was going to get worse, right? So I
Yeah.
distracted myself. And so I just
Yeah.
was
Wow.
watching kitten videos,
Mm.
bloopers, just to kind of get
I love it.
myself through.
Oh, kitten
Yeah, and
videos. Yeah.
yeah, I just knew I just had to get it and until my physical body stabilized before my
Mm.
emotions could get addressed and I had to
Yeah.
put them aside. And that's my journey. If I wasn't going through a physical crisis, maybe
Hmm.
I would have cried more.
Mm.
I think. Who knows? Maybe
Yeah.
not. I mean, it's impossible to
But it's
say, right?
incredible. Yeah. It's incredible that you have this awareness and that you were so in tune with where your body was at and what your
Yeah.
mind needed. And um, I do know from my own personal experience, we do have some sort of influence on that, what we allow, what we don't allow. I don't think I've ever went into denial with the whole thing. I I do know that I was very aware and very observant of what was happening within me as well as with my boys. I just want to say I turned into lion mom. I think I always was lion mom, but it was even more so in that time that and there was so much to do. I had this to-do list and that was distraction in itself. There was always the all the steps that you need to go through afterwards.
Yes.
Uh, and in terms of the steps that you go through, I know that you have written a book about this experience. Did that help you actually then with the processing as well? Can you share a little bit about how this idea came about and what you actually share in this book? It's called 14
Absolutely.
Days, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And I actually started writing it when I was in quarantine because I
Oh,
had to
wow.
have something to do.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
so I read a lot about what to do in quarantine in Australia because,
Hmm.
in general, everybody going through quarantine was going back not because of a fun situation,
Of
that
course. Yeah.
so it was basically, I think somebody in the group said, pick up a hobby, do something. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, I guess I'll write a memoir then. No, I didn't think I'll write a
Mm.
memoir. I just thought
Yeah.
I'd just write a journal.
Yeah.
I'd keep a
Yeah.
journal. And
Mm.
so I kept a journal and I wrote in it every single day, and that actually turned into a
Mm.
memoir. And when I
Yeah.
came back and after the exhaustion had passed, which was probably a few months, then I started
Mm.
writing and putting
Hmm.
the story together. And that's when I
Hmm.
really started processing my grief because I
Wow, I
kept
can
going
imagine
over the
because you go back into
story
it. Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time and I kept revising the story and editing it
Mm.
and going through it. And each time I went through it, I felt like I got a little more of a piece of healing. I was able to
Yeah.
heal a little bit on a deeper level. And so I think that's probably the way that I grieved mostly was through my writing.
And it's so beautiful. I went through a similar process. I wrote about our story about 4 months after Rob passed. It took me 4 weeks. So 5 months after he passed, I published
Yeah.
my first book about it. I think it is such a cathartic
Yes.
experience to have this opportunity because you're almost like in observer mode as well as going through it.
Yes.
It's that double
Yes.
whammy of experiencing again, getting this opportunity to process a lot of the facts and emotions that were coming through. And that, as you said, I felt it brought a lot of healing in as well, going through that again, being allowed to experience, go through it, but also be the observer because you are the writer of your own story and you have both perspectives basically. So if that's okay with you, I would love to share the link to your book in the show notes as well so people can have
Yes.
a look at that.
Yes.
um, we also mentioned that you had different losses before your mom's and that they were very different. Would you like to share a little bit about that? I just want to give you the opportunity if you want to.
Yes, absolutely. So before my mother passed away, I think maybe just a couple of years beforehand, my mother's mother passed away, but she
Hmm.
was 94 years old, and that was a
Oh,
very
wow.
different death. And
Yeah.
and it was at the end of her life, and she'd had a good life. And
Mm.
so seeing somebody pass, as sad as it was, it was also a celebration of her life, and that's very
Oh,
different than
goosebumps.
losing somebody.
I love that.
Yeah, and it was such an incredibly, like, it was like I felt like I sent off my grandmother, and the
Mm,
circumstances in which it happened was quite magical. And
mm,
we were, the whole family was there. It happened in Japan,
oh,
and we just kind of we got
wow.
stuck in Japan because there was a tsunami that destroyed the airport. And so we all
Wow.
ended up being in Japan at the same time. It was like this really incredible, like, I don't know what you
Yeah.
could call that, right? But it was like, to me, it
Divine
was
timing, divine
magic.
guidance.
Yes,
Yeah.
something. I
Incredible.
don't know what that
Yeah.
was. So that felt really, really different that from
Yeah.
my mother's passing. And then before that was my father's passed away. There was also a
Hmm.
lot of friends in between. I'll go back between in a minute with those.
Yeah,
But
that's okay.
in my immediate family, then my father
Mm.
died about 15 years ago. And as I said, that was a very different death where we
Hmm.
had known for a long time that he was sick, and I really got to say a proper goodbye. And I felt very positive about the
Mm.
way that our relationship had, we were able to say goodbye. And it was a little bit very different from my mum, as
Mm.
I said.
Yeah.
And I think then the one that stands out a lot to me was one of my best friends passed away about, I think she passed away about 10 years ago now, and she was very young. So
Mm.
she was only 40 when she passed away, and she left two
Yeah.
children behind, very
Wow.
sick. And
Yeah.
that's a different level of just awful, tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so very complicated. And that one stayed with me, and I processed that. Took me even, I think, longer to process than my mom, because I think just
Hmm.
losing a close friend that's so young
Yeah.
is just,
Yeah.
but there's also quite some time that's also passed between that
Yeah.
passing. But I think also I was in so much shock that she had passed that I didn't really start grieving her until about 2 years after she passed away.
Mm.
And grief is such an interesting thing because, sometimes it's quite immediate and sometimes there's quite a delay, especially for me
Yeah.
when the shock was so intense that
Yeah.
I was so preoccupied with different things in my life that I just couldn't, it just wasn't even there. Like I just was like buffered from my
Mm.
grief. So I've
Yeah.
had these very varied experiences of losing people at different stages of my life. And also at 19, I lost my
And
first
also,
friend.
oh,
As,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
she dies of cancer as well. And that was tragic too. I was very upset about that. And that also obviously
Yeah.
a very long time ago, but it really impacted me. So that was my first friend that died at at
Yeah.
19. It's so young.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for sharing this. And I feel what you said, at different stages of your life, and then also thinking also very, very different stages of their lives, the people that have
Hmm.
passed before us, to look at, a 19-year-old or a 94-year-old. And
Yes.
for me, there's always this, I would love to wrap our conversation up today with what is actually the one thing that you feel that I actually want to say gained out of all of this, because for me, there's always we learn so much through experiences like that about how precious life is, and about
Yes.
gratitude, about the moments that we are gifted. I often talk about the hidden gifts in adversity. So for me, I would love to, pass this back to you in terms of what do you feel is maybe not just the number one thing, but a couple of things that were the most important things that you learned that you could then use in your life, because I feel there's also always like a sort of guidance in there. I feel that I am living life very, very differently before Rob's passing. There is so much more appreciation and gratitude for things. I would love to hear your experience, because you had so many different losses over the years. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Of course, yes. So I think that life is really precious, and the connections that we have, we never know when we're going to lose somebody, right? And to
Mm,
just always remember to tell them, how you feel about them and how grateful you are that they're in your life.
yeah. I love this so much, and I'm sitting here with the biggest smile on my face, because This is, for me, I believe, the number one lesson that I learned from my dad's passing. I was 20 when I lost my dad, and he was 46. And I remember that I did not get the moment. I did not get the opportunity to say goodbye. I did not know. And in hindsight, I could maybe say I did not want to know that it was the last time I saw him. So I grappled with that for a while, that not having had the chance to say goodbye to my dad. Yet what I learned from this is to never leave anything unsaid. You know, when there's something beautiful I want to say to people, whether that be a stranger on the street or whether that are my boys, there's not one day where I don't tell my boys that I love them. And we say that multiple times a day. It's such a normal thing in our household that we say that to each other. They even say they're teenagers and they even say that in front of their friends. So I feel very, very blessed to have instilled that in them, that it's a just normal thing to talk about our emotions and what we feel for each other. And I think that is such a gift. And I had this moment where I felt that was the most beautiful gift that my dad could have given me for our marriage, because we lived a marriage of no regrets. We would tell each other every single day how much we meant for each other. We had this really beautiful, fulfilled marriage for 12 years. We only had 12 years with each other because we met quite late. But those 12 years were absolutely magical for me. They were such an amazing gift. And I don't know, I can't tell you what would have happened if I wouldn't have learned that through my dad. It's just really, for me, it left me with my heart full of gratitude for everything that I do have and that I learned, but also the understanding that this is not the answer to everything. Gratitude to me is not the immediate answer to grief, because it's the last thing that you can say to somebody who's just lost for somebody, or just be grateful for what you have. It feels like a slap in the face. You can't do that, you know. But when you come to this understanding and when you get to this space where you feel absolute bliss and gratitude for what you do have, then it becomes a beautiful gift. And that to me is one of the hidden gifts in adversity. So yeah, Momoko, I'm so grateful that you came on today. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful stories. And how can people connect with you if they would like to connect or get your book? We will share that link. What is the best way to find out more about you?
So my website is momokowrites.com, and that has information about my books. And my books are available on Amazon, 14 Days by Momoko Uno.
Yeah. Awesome. We will definitely share both links. So you can have the website. We'll share the link directly to Amazon, whatever works best for you. And I just want to say thank you for being here. I really, really enjoyed our time together. And everybody else watching this, if you enjoy what you're seeing here, I really encourage you to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you will get an update every time we go live here on a weekly basis in Unsilence Grief. Momoko, thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening. This is Momoko and Marie signing off. Bye for now. Thank you for watching.